A bombshell that left everyone stunned in front of a live audience, no less. Rasheeda looked to Kirk, the stage lights dimming just enough to ignite the fire in her eyes. Her expression froze in shock. Fans are astonished, and to be honest, nobody anticipated it. Not in this manner. Karlie escalated the controversy with new screenshots of purported messages between Kirk and a lady from his past who he dated a few weeks ago. According to crowd rumors and a crew member's since-deleted tweet, "You still think you can play both?" "Sides, Rasheeda does," she added, gesturing with her phone. The energy shifted entirely. Feelings were running high. Rasheeda had already gotten up from the sofa when Kirk attempted to interrupt and laugh it off. "You embarrassing me again," she remarked as she moved directly toward him. And then it occurred. The crowd fell silent in shock after hearing a harsh, open-handed smack. It wasn't simply a loud smack. It reverberated across the halls of VH1, on social media, and in every group chat that has followed the chaotic voyage of Rasheeda and Kirk. Rumors are already circulating about Karlie's true motivation. How serious is this treachery? And did Kirk and Rasheeda's relationship just suffer its last, irreparable blow? There was more than just a buzz on the reunion stage. It was tense. Before the main event's camera ever began to film, the something heavy was in the air, and Cass could feel it. With her knees crossed, her face tense, and her eyes fixed on no one in particular, Rasheeda sat on the far end of the sofa. Kirk was sitting with few pillows away, dressed casually, but he was obviously fidgeting. His gaze darted around the stage as if he was anticipating a storm. As well as the storm, it arrived holding a phone while wearing a crimson bodycon dress. Karlie read. Karlie was supposed to cause a commotion. Although it's her specialty, no one anticipated that she would arrive with what seemed to be receipts. As the discussion veered toward, Karlie went to the host, leaned forward a little, and uttered something that made the whole room shiver. Connections and loyalty. "We're being honest tonight, so I wasn't going to say anything. But Rasheeda needs to see something." The crowd leaned in. Kirk's mouth clenched almost reflexively as the castmates glanced around anxiously. Rasheeda remained unflinching. "Karlie, what's going on this time?" With a composed but agitated tone, she inquired. Karlie took her phone out, gave it 2 taps, and held it up so everyone could see. The name at the top of the blurry screenshot was clearly visible. Kirk. Though ambiguous, the signals were damning. A chat that alluded to meet, flirtatious messages, a miss you followed by a winking emoji, and a time pause that was just 3 weeks old. There was silence in the studio, the kind of quiet that makes your heart pound. Kirk moved around in his chair. "Dude, you're going to believe this," he continued, attempting to laugh as if it were all a joke. "Do you believe I'm that stupid?" Karlie grinned broadly. "It's not about my beliefs. It has to do with what your wife observes." She handed Rasheeda the phone. The room altered at that very instant. Rasheeta hesitantly picked up the phone and looked at the screen, her face inscrutable. She just nodded, her lips pressed together, without shouting or crying. "So, let's get back to this," she whispered. "Baby, you know how people be faking texts," Kirk said, leaning in to minimize the situation. Anyone might be this. However, the harm was already done. Even the production staff seemed still behind the cameras, and the crowd started muttering. Then Kirk made a mistake, the type of error you don't recover from. He chuckled. He was not permitted to laugh, but it was simply another day in the life to giggle dismissively like this. Rasheeda got up as he remarked, "You really letting Karlie get in your head again?" He shook his head. "Girl, been mad since I never messed with her like that." The audience gasped in real time, and several actors shifted uneasily. Erica Manna was seen mouthing, "Oh no." Rasheeda approached Kirk from the other side of the platform, her shoes soft on the stage floor. Kirk remained sitting, perhaps expecting her to yell at him, but she lifted her hand and slapped him without saying anything. It was primal, and the sound reverberated around the studio. It wasn't contrived, and it wasn't theatrical for TV. Crowd erupted, with some screams and others standing up in horror as Kirk's head rotated with the hit in his hand. Immediately went up to touch his face. Security didn't step in yet, but the host became quiet when Yandi muttered something to Spice. Stopped, too. Kirk sat there for a while before slowly getting to his feet and scratching his face, which showed more embarrassment than anger. "Are you serious now?" Rasheeda didn't answer when he inquired in a low voice, so she turned and went back to her seat, this time sitting at the furthest end to put as much space between herself and Kirk as possible. Her hands were trembling. Her expression was composed, as if she had finally said what needed to be conveyed without using words. Production halted the recording for 10 minutes, and crew members gathered around monitors. Kirk was brought aside by someone. Karlie sat smugly, as if she had accomplished her mission, while Rasheeda remained still, ignoring everyone. A few cast members approached her, muttering things we couldn't hear. But it was obvious from her body language that she didn't want solace. She didn't want justifications. She just wanted room. The atmosphere had changed when the taping started. Up again, once the cameras began rolling again, Kirk attempted to explain himself, but a producer stepped out and said that the subject would shift. They sought to calm the crowd down, but the damage was already done. He said, "This is nothing new. We've been through worse. People often attempt to put us to the test," yet his comments were ineffective. Rasheeda remained still, her gaze fixed on the ground, and each time he talked, it seemed as if she was no longer in the same backstage area, and the chaos was just becoming worse. Kirk wanted to know exactly how the slap appeared on camera, so he asked to see the raw footage. According to someone from wardrobe, another crew member said Kirk was attempting to have the scene cut, claiming it would harm the brand, but the producers weren't budgeting because they knew they had hit gold. The slap was real, the emotion was raw, and the ratings would go over the roof. Sometimes the truth hurts, but it sells on reality TV. Rasheeda exited without talking to Kirk as the reunion came to an end. Fans were already chatting outside the studio, but she didn't wait for a vehicle with him, didn't check in with anybody, picked up her bag, and left with her head held high. Within minutes, hashtags were circulating on social media, and some people had witnessed the smack through glass windows. Even other cast members were conflicted after Rasheeda's slap, #Karlie exposed Kirk, #ung and wrong. Spice told a producer, "I haven't seen her that angry in years." According to reports, Erica Mena set off Kamara. Good for her. Honestly, that release was necessary for her. Later that evening, Gandhi, who usually tries to maintain harmony, attempted to text Rasheeda and Kirk, but only Kirk replied. Karlie, on the other hand, doubled down. Later that night, she played coy on her Instagram Live, but she grinned at the camera and added, "I just speak truth." His response? "I messed up again. Perhaps it's time to quit lying if the truth hurts." Fans flooded her comments with praise and criticism, with some accusing her of inciting conflict. However, she got precisely what she wanted, mention headlines, and a front row ticket to the disintegration of one of the most talked about couples in love and hip-hop. What was even more tragic about this moment was Rasheeda and Kirk have witnessed a lot of scandals, public breakups, secret babies, and makeup, but this felt different. This wasn't simply another dispute, it was a searing public humiliation that sprang from a source of pent-up sorrow. A slap was about all the times she swallowed her pride, forgave him without saying sorry, and supported him while everyone else watched her suffer. It wasn't just about the text messages. That night's audience saw more than just drama. They saw a woman push herself to the edge, and Kirk, for once, was unable to use charm to get out of it. Rasheeda's departure from the reunion that night wasn't silent, was it? The slap was heard not just in the studio but also across the fan base, and everyone was asking the same question. Is this finally the end for Kirk and Rasheeda, or simply another chapter in their never-ending storm? Calm, she just packed her belongings, and gave production a look that said, "Don't follow me," instead of crying or slamming doors in the dressing room, as if speaking to anybody would somehow erase the picture that was now ingrained in every viewer's memory. Kirk remained behind, still attempting to explain the inexplicable, but the stillness she left behind was deafening. Tension was in the air outside, and some fans had congregated close to the lot after hearing stories of the slap while still watching the live feed. Everyone wanted a hug, and phones were out and voices were hushed. Producers congregated backstage, as Rasheeda refused to give them a glance, stepping into her vehicle, quietly closing the door, and vanishing into the Atlanta night without a word. Some considered it television gold, while Thirsts was genuinely worried that things had gone too far, that it had gone too far. They debated whether to spin the story or let the footage speak for itself. Kirk, meantime, sat in his dressing room, his jaw still red from the slap. He was given an ice pack, but he didn't use it. Instead, he simply gazed into the glass, silently, mumbling under his breath and shaking his head every now and again. His phone was constantly ringing with messages from fans, relatives, and friends he hadn't spoken to in years. One message in particular, from his eldest son, made him shudder. "You really let her down again, huh?" she wrote. "I didn't do nothing but show the truth." Karlie Red was heard telling a hairstylist on set, demonstrating her unrepentant attitude. Why is he angry if he has nothing to hide? Some crew members completely avoided her since they weren't sure whether to be impressed or angry. Spice, who had been attempting to maintain her objectivity, eventually relaxed while speaking with a producer. "It's not even about the texts," she remarked. "The disrespect accumulates over the years, and if you continue to injure someone who has been faithful to you, eventually they will take offense." VH1 was still clinging to that, and later that night, video from the reunion started to surface on fan sites. It wasn't the complete slap. Behind-the-scenes footage, Karlie smiling while flicking her hair and drinking water, Kirk standing by himself on stage, sharp walk-off. Fans were furious, with some supporting Rasheeda and describing her as strong, courageous, and beyond her breaking point, while others criticized Kirk and shared timelines of all the scandals he had ever been involved in. Karlie was even trending, with others arguing about whether she was bold or just untidy. By morning, the internet had made it a big deal, with videos and animated cartoons depicting the slap. The phrase, "Rasheeda finally snapped," was all over the place. She hadn't liked or commented on anything, hadn't posted anything, but her silence spoke louder than words. Someone even slowed down the video of Rasheeda rising up and added dramatic music. However, Kirk attempted to repair the damage by going live on Instagram while sitting in his vehicle and seemed exhausted and defeated. "I just want to clear the air," he said. "I love my wife and I have made errors. But this entire issue, this Karlie, is simply clout chasing. Look, Rasheeda and I have been through it everything. I'll believe anything you want to believe." He received a barrage of comments right once, with some urging him to accept responsibility and others to log out. "We've heard this speech before," one individual wrote. "Now, actions count." Somehow, backstage audio that wasn't intended for the general public ended up online. "We can't cut the slap," a producer is heard saying on the tape. "It's just too raw and true. Rasheeda has never done it to us before. But is it going to break them?" asks another. The first voice responds, "Maybe. Or maybe this is what ultimately forces them to be truthful with one another, like for real." After a day, at long last, Rasheeda spoke out, not with a press release or lengthy post, but with just one Instagram story. A dark screen with the words, "Love can blind you sometimes," written in white. "Pain can sometimes make you see everything." There were no tags or mentions, but everyone understood who it was about, and bloggers took it up in a matter of minutes. Rasheeda speaks after live slap. Rasheeda's heartbreak in 8 words. "And is this the end of Frost fam?" headlines said. Although BH1 remained silent in public, insiders said they were thinking about doing a second reunion program. Many cast members wanted to digest what had transpired, not for the sake of viewers. In a group conversation, Erica allegedly said, "We all watched that man humiliate her for years. Hey, and now we're acting shocked she finally hit back." The internet said that Spice's response was, "She didn't hit back for TV, she hit back because she's tired." Kirk began contacting Rasheeda, sent flowers to her boutique, and attempted to call her, but she did not answer. They were given back. When he eventually arrived at their home, which they still nominally shared, she refused to allow him in and instead sent photographers captured the scene as Kirk remained there for about 20 minutes after receiving a message through the door, "I need space and I need truth." He was standing with a tiny overnight bag and looking at the locked door without shouting or rapping on it. Later that day, he sent another photo that evening, showing a wedding band resting softly on a nightstand and writing, "I hope I still deserve this." Karlie, meantime, took advantage of the opportunity and went live once again, this time with another lady. Backup said she had lately messaged Kirk. The girl seemed apprehensive, but Karlie spoke most of the time. "They usually think I'm dirty," she added. "But maybe if women would not suffer as much if people paid attention to what I had to say." There was disagreement among her admirers. Some hailed her as opportunistic. However, there was no denying the hype. People were living the show, analyzing every action, every word, and every pause. Then came the voicemail, which was shared anonymously. No one can tell whether it was a cast member, a staff member, or a betrayed friend. Kirk is heard speaking to someone in the slightly muted but sufficiently audible audio. "I didn't intend for it to get this far," he admits. "All I wanted was for her to settle down before we resumed filming." "Bro, you should have never laughed," responds the voice on the other line, who is thought to be a buddy or producer. "That's what triggered her." After pausing, Kirk murmurs, "I understand. Maybe I haven't changed, but I keep believing I have." It struck a new chord once the message went viral, and it was now about a guy understanding too late what his Rasheeda became a symbol of strength and vulnerability, rather than perfection, as fans shared their own tales of staying in relationships too long, forgiving too much, and ultimately saying enough because pride had cost him. And Kirk turned into a warning. The producers realized they couldn't ignore the growing noise, so they arranged. It was still uncertain whether she had consented to shoot it, but everyone hoped she would. It was a unique sit-down episode. Just Rasheeda and Kirk. No audience, no distractions. Just them and the truth. The reunion may have ended, but the true tale was just getting started. People wanted closure, not for ratings or shock value, but maybe they also needed it for Kirk and Rasheeda, and everyone who watched, including fans, followers, and cast members, was anticipating what would happen when the cameras ran again. Would there be reconciliation? Or would the slap be the last chapter in a love tale that had endured too many storms? The planned sit-down episode wasn't like anything VH1 had created in a long time. The network knew they had a hit, but they also realized that viewers weren't watching for gossip anymore. Instead, they were emotionally immersed in the consequences, Kirk's remorse, and Rasheeda's quiet. Producers contacted Rasheeda personally after Karlie's interference caused the reunion to become viral. But what happened next would either fix what was left or ruin it forever. She first turned down their offer of complete control over the edit, a female-led crew, and the freedom to leave at any time. They wanted her truth, not the Instagram or show versions, but the unadulterated, unfiltered anger that made her smack Kirk in front of the world. A week later, she called back, but she needed time. Time away from Kirk, time away from cameras, time away from questions. "I'll sit down with him once, and I want no interruptions," she replied in a clear, calm voice. Kirk showed up first on the day of the recording, wearing a straightforward shirt. No gaudy chains, no crew, just him and a notepad he'd been scrawling in all morning. And he looked older, as if the week's worth of worry had finally sunk in. There was no greeting or embrace as Rasheeda entered. Rasheeda didn't flinch when the interviewer inquired about the slap. So she sat down opposite him, crossed her legs, and waited for the first question. "Didn't plan it," she continued. But it wasn't just those messages that were at the center of that moment. It was the years, the lies, and the way I've had to bear everything while acting like we're all right. Kirk remained silent and nodded slowly. They spoke for over an hour. "I embarrassed you," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not just that night, but for years." Acknowledged her frailty, ego, and tendency to take her allegiance for granted. Rasheeda did not cry. She also didn't forgive him. She just listened. "You at one point," she observed, "you always say you love me, but I think you love the non-fighting version of me." The room became silent, and even the cameramen sensed it. At the conclusion, Kirk took out the notebook and revealed that he had written a letter, not only an apology, but a confession about sorrow, love, treachery, and survival. This was not reality TV. He read the whole thing, his voice quivering, recalling the times he let her down. The moments he should have supported her but didn't. The truths he shunned. Again, Rasheeda didn't interrupt, and she gave him a single nod when he was done. "I appreciate you saying it, even though it's too late," she said. 2 days later,